Reviewing Snowpiercer Season 4, Episode 6, Belle the Cat, and Episode 7, A Moth to the Flame. Guys, I am back in it. Episode 6 really stands out and reaffirms all the things that make Snowpiercer a great ensemble cast thriller. Episode 7 is a little bit shakier, but I'm accepting it as a bridging piece to whatever 8, 9, and 10 are gonna give us. We finally get enough about these international peacekeepers to make them a compelling problem instead of just like this confusing hodgepodgey mess. The roll into episode 7 is a little bit messy, and I cannot believe that we basically spent 2 whole episodes mourning the death of Ben. But we're on the other side of it now, so let's talk about these 2 episodes, starting with the characters. In New Eden, we have Oz, and he is looking for Roach. I knew Oz and Roach had been separated in episode 5, but I didn't realize that Roach had actually been taken and was missing. I just thought the two lost each other in the snow. And it seems like losing Roach out in the blizzard combined with finding Wiggins missing his arm has really like snapped Oz back into reality and given him like some drive and purpose that he needs to function in this narrative. I do worry that we can only get an arc out of Oz if Roach remains missing. Now that we're at the episode 7 mark and we still haven't really followed up on that thread, I'm worried that maybe Roach is just gone forever, which sucks because he has been a solid character since season 1, and I just feel like he's definitely got a place in this finale. It moves us into Javi, who's the sole original council member still in New Eden. I think he's doing a great job holding down the fort, rallying the remaining leaders, and when in crisis, he has remembered this time to assure everyone it's going to be alright, we just need to get to stations. So he's learned something from that last encounter where Roach had to come smooth things over for him. Now at the end of episode 7, we do see an explosion from a distance away where Javi was trying to disassemble a bomb. It's possible this is his death, and if so, it sucks and is just generally terrible. But it's equally possible this is a fake out because he had successfully removed it, and I think like if he just like chucked it and it had blown up, that would be fine as a solution. At this point, the only reason I can think for them to kill Javi off is for us to like be narrowing down the amount of engineers available to deal with the Snowpiercer train. Rose Sykes is here. We get to see a little bit of that old Wilfred enforcer come out in her. I thought it was a little sad we had to explicitly be told that she joined AgSec specifically to get away from the violence Wilfred had ingrained into her. Like for me, her placement combined with her change of outfit was more than enough to tell me that she was a different person now and was loyal to like the New Eden colony situation. In fact, explicitly stating it actually has me second guessing her a lot more than I would have otherwise. And now I'm beginning to wonder if she's like the inside person who fed information and helped coordinate everything with the soldiers. I don't want her to double cross the colony, but her explicitly stating this is why she was in AgSec, combined with the fact that she complained she hadn't been part of the council as part of like a Wilfred prejudice, sort of signals to me that she's working a little bit too hard to be this kind of like redemptive character. Historically, words like discrimination and claims of acts of reprisal are threats that the bad guys throw out to sort of throw the good guys off their scent. And she also makes her personal appeal to Javi, a guy who the good guys seem to implicitly trust even though they dismiss his opinions or concerns, which kind of makes him a little bit isolated and an outcast within the group of good guys, and therefore the weakest link as far as appealing to someone to give her a chance. Episode 7 doesn't really build on this in any kind of meaningful way, but there is this dangling thread that like it feels as if someone must have been helping besides just Dr. Headwood to make all this stuff work out in New Eden the way it has. Moving us over into Big Alice. There's really not a lot interesting going on with Ruth. She loses her composure at the end of episode 6, and I didn't particularly care for it. Mostly because in season 1 through 3, arguably crazier stuff happened, and Ruth always maintained calm professionalism or minimally maintained focus and drive. And really, we never saw much screen time between her and Ben, so her taking Ben's loss hard on a personal level doesn't make a lot of sense to me. At least in season 1, when she was upset about Nolan, they had spent some time together and had built clear chemistry and romance. And even like in season 3, she's building a relationship between her and Pike, so we can see why she'd be torn or upset about all the little machinations going on. Here, I don't know that she says 2 words to Ben before this guy like sacrifices himself. So I feel like all of her upset and conflict about Ben dying all boils down to he's an engineer, and here in Snowpiercer, having engineers means life, where lack of engineers stops the engine from running, which equals death. A little bit of a classist mind system that I felt like Ruth had sort of deprogrammed herself from. If she was ever programmed that way at all, because certainly in season 1, she was more than happy to kill off Melanie, who was a very important engineer, if it meant she got her vengeance. Not to mention, in season 3, we banished Wilfred off the train, and that guy was also a pretty important engineer. I don't know, overall I just felt like poor Zara. She got so little of a tribute, so little like further mentions and memorable moments, and in the show she was so much more than Ben was. Just totally uneven screen time, mourning, loss, or like character discussion. Til's in here trying to play the supportive role, being frustrated she can't get to Audrey. I really feel like the show itself has sidelined her and is misusing her character here at the end. I hope she gets an opportunity to shine, and I hope she gets reunited with Audrey and they get a little bit of a happily ever after. I do hope that Audrey isn't just written off the show at this juncture and we get no more of her either. Bringing us back to the bunker. We open in episode 6 with Leighton just like underground with the rest of the exiles, and that was like a great jump cut way to explain several bits very quickly to us through showing versus telling. I was hopeful at the end of episode 6 that even though Leighton was planning to leave all these people behind now, he'd be able to rally them as an army later, but I just don't think that's where we're going with this season, which is disappointing. I feel like introducing this element of like the tale of the bunker and like the actual leader still being alive and well, along with a bunch of scientists and stuff, could have really given us some drive, reunited this class warfare, doing the right thing, collective bargaining kind of element that the show's missing this season. Since Wilfred does kill the Admiral at the end of episode 7 and leaves the bunker leaderless, I guess it's possible that this woman does retake over command and comes in as a Deus Ex Machina at the end to save everyone. But being with her on the ground level, rebuilding this, restructuring things, getting a working understanding and stopping things, I feel like would probably be more interesting in a lot of ways than what we're watching right now. We're finally reunited with Josie in episode 7. I'm happy to see her here, but there's not a lot to talk about. I thought we were seeing some development with Alex in episode 6, where we were going to get to see her play a little bit of cat and mouse, a little poker game. She's very cold and quick pro quo with Nima, which I thought was the right way to handle him, and I thought had like indicated some devious shenanigans going on down the line. Unfortunately, episode 7 shuts down what could have been like a fun spy back and forth slow burn as we all go back on the train and everything gets revealed. I guess I'm a little bit relieved because I was afraid Alex was going to become some kind of like lab experiment test subject for Nima, and I guess that's still on the table in Snowpiercer, but probably isn't going to happen since he doesn't really care about the effects of Gemini. He just wants to launch it, so like experimenting on Alex is kind of a waste of his time. Which brings us into Melanie. I had wondered if her being gone from the bunker so long was intentional on her part, on her and Nima's part, on the Admiral's part, but no, there's no like secret hidden plan. She's back and it's like a normal expedition, her returning on a basically normal scheduled time. Also, she's completely blindsided by everything that happened in the bunker, which is probably the least fun version of Melanie we could have. Overall, I think her return was just not worth the wait to me in general. She has her ever-constant certainty and like a commanding presence, but she lacks like the power for her authority to mean anything. She is getting, in my opinion, a little bit of comeuppance because certainly in season 1 she more or less did the same thing to Leighton. She used him for his expertise and discarded him immediately when he had outlived his usefulness. And it seems like she had been doing that on the train for a long time, so it must suck to like have become so important and have so much authority and gravitas within Snowpiercer, and to realize the second that your bubble expands, you're a nobody that someone else is going to discard the same way you discarded others. We're going to talk a little bit about Anton Milius, even though he's dead. I found it an interesting contrast in episode 6 to see how he leads as a straight up tyrant, where Wilfred leads as a tyrant who occasionally rewards people. And you can see how that is like significantly more effective than just being cruel and oppressive the entire time would be. So that was like a fun little conversation point he provided us. I'm bummed that he died, mostly because we'll never know why he wanted to blow up New Eden or if Nema knew about it. Also, I just think it was a waste of an episode intro for us to get it from the Admiral's perspective when that guy's about to die off. Who even cares about his wife, his power struggle, all this kind of stuff? So that left me feeling like his character was a nothing character that I'd spent a lot of time fixating on for no good reason. And the show encouraged me to do it by giving us intros that mean nothing less than 40 minutes later. So in episode 6, my first question was, how complicit is Nema? And at the top of episode 7, we find out that he's been scheming with the Admiral the whole time. And at the end of episode 7, we find out he's the driving factor. I don't love this for us, like this twist on who the bad guy is, being the dude who originally shot up the C4 and froze the world. Now we're here at the end, once again putting the world in jeopardy for his own hubris. There is a narrative symmetry. I can see why the pitch appealed to the writers, but seeing what they did with it on screen, it's not appealing or satisfying. I just don't know or care about this Nema guy that much. He was in the middle of facing a major time-sensitive crisis when he made a miscalculation with the CW7. He's not really in a time crunch here with the Gemini chemical, so this is a lot less forgivable. It's sort of implied that he's like a little bunker insane or whatever, and that he's just been unchecked so long. This doesn't really like work as like a surprise reveal to me, because the same way Wilfred knew that Nema was responsible for the CW7, Melanie would have known too. This man was her teacher. They were all like working together and up on the news articles and sort of like co-collaborating. Stuff like this is not secret in scientific society. Also, it makes sense to me that Nema would want to go to human testing, but the way that they're doing the human testing is so unscientific and unhelpful. I don't know why Nema would agree to it or allow it. They could have just locked these people in their rooms and gassed them in there, because as it is, there's just too many variables going down there on like the running bunker situation they have going on. Like, are they suffering from the Gemini chemical, or is this starvation or high stress or like a whole host of other things that could be happening down there? Which moves me into Dr. Headwood. Her character is just sort of confusing to me at this point. I guess we're just supposed to read her as loyal to Wilfred at all costs. I guess it doesn't really matter at this juncture because I don't think she's going to be in episodes 8, 9, or 10. Moving us into Wilfred. Open question whether or not he's dead. He smoked a blunt that made it appear as if he was dead, but certainly the Headwoods have made more diabolical concoctions than something that like fakes his own death. Also, character-wise, it doesn't make sense for Wilfred to suicide. I just don't see him going this route. Like, it's not in his nature. Part of what drove him to build these trains, to get on Big Alice, to make a cull of 100 people, to survive for 7 years, to get to Snowpiercer, to scheme his way to the top of Snowpiercer, and then to be captured and to continually like create constant chaos and destruction is a survival drive, cruelty, manipulation that is never going to surrender. If this was the end, we did get a moment of coolness where he becomes like Icy Bob 2.0. I don't understand the illness or the response to the illness, and it leaves a lot of questions for me personally that we probably will never get an answer to, and probably wasn't very well thought out if I'm being totally honest. So that moves me into specific scenes. I really liked episode 6. I felt like the back and forth between Headwood and Wilfred was very good in this episode. The moment the Admiral comes to see Wilfred and he's palling around with the soldiers and he takes Wilfred's cigar and unlights it on one of his soldiers' hands, that was great. Back to that body horror, cruelty, chilling element Snowpiercer does so well. The soldiers going down with the food rations and like forcing to either experiment on those people or collect samples from those people was really good. It was a chilling, creepy moment with great little flashes of action and terror. The way Wilfred casually tosses that one soldier under the bus after telling him that he forgives him for just doing his job. Classic, fun Wilfred. Likewise, I don't have a single scene in episode 7 that stands out, which might tell you the difference between the two episodes in my eyes, and also moves us into the themes of the show so far. Starting with the climate change is real, environmentalism aspect of it all. So here we are, learning about about the lethal results to develop the Gemini chemical. We're learning about the human experimentation that seems both quite intentional and very incompetently done, in my opinion. We also learn that the worm pocket itself is full of a chemical that might be negatively impacting and or slowly killing the residents of New Eden. And Melanie's research comes in and sort of implies that the Gemini chemical disperses the CW7, but we have no ozone layer without the CW7, so like oxygen is going to escape and we're going to be exposed to the space radiation and all that's bad. The space radiation part, sure. I don't know that I buy that oxygen leaves Earth if there's no ozone layer. I just think the general like density and mass and all that would keep the air molecules here. But I don't know anything about science, so don't quote me on that. It just struck me as wrong science off the top. Generally, there's not really good science in this season, and I think they should have consulted some folks because like in the flashback we learned part of the reason we go to human testing is because all the animals are dead. Not a scientist, don't know almost anything about science, and I'm not for animal testing, so I especially don't know about that. But I do know every scientific test you do has a control, which means you'd have animals you expose to the chemical, animals not exposed to the chemical. These not exposed animals would always be healthy and well. Plus, you would think like if your animals are lab rats and rabbits, you'd always keep a section of them as a breeding pair because those animals breed very quickly and easily. And if they were breeding too quickly, you could kill them for meat and have like a fun little like rabbit stew party or whatever in your bunker. So the fact that all the animals are dead tell me that they didn't have a scientific control. It also tells me they didn't have a plan for the longevity of these experiments. It's like failure all around from a science and planning perspective. Again, not an expert, but I have a lot of questions about the radiation thing too. I'm assuming the burns on Audrey's face are a result of her going through areas where the ozone layer is thin and being exposed to the radiation. But if that's the case, then everyone in New Eden has been exposed to like pretty high levels of radiation because they're in a pocket without ozone and they were living there for 9 months with no ill effects. And 9 months is definitely long enough for there to be some kind of effects from radiation poisoning. Maybe your argument's going to be that the bubble is just radioactive at the edges, which is why when the dove gets too close, it dies. But if that's the case, then how is the military coming in on snowcats? Like, I can see some kind of warped argument about Snowpiercer having some kind of radiation shielding. Fine, I'll give you that. But then we know that these soldiers are coming in and out on snowcats with no radiation protection. Also, we know that Alex, Boki, and Josie all travel to the edge of the bubble fairly frequently to do research, and none of them seem to be suffering from radiation. As a sidebar, I sort of expect that all the weirdness going on with Oz is going to be chalked up to overexposure of the radiation, but radiation sickness doesn't work the way that Oz is experiencing, so I think that's more confusing than helpful. And lastly, Nima assuring Melanie that they can survive the Gemini exposure is like not helpful because radiation makes people sterile, so them surviving doesn't mean that they'll be able to create the next generation of people, so it doesn't actually ensure humanity's survival long term. And Nima certainly hasn't given enough time or done any kind of experiments when it comes to whether or not people can reproduce after exposure. So overall, I would say that this environmentalism theme has transformed over into a general hubris of man kind of theme, where our attempt to conquer nature is probably going to destroy us all, moving us into loneliness, isolation, and a loss of normalcy. We get to see a little bit of this in the isolation of the experimented crew in the bunker. I was hoping we were going to really build and expand on this, but it seems like probably dropped that thread in favor of being back on Snowpiercer. We do also get an interesting idea of isolation, loneliness here when Leighton, Josie, and Liana are uncoupled from the rest of Snowpiercer. From what we know about uncoupling like this, Leighton has about 10 minutes to survive before he passes away. Josie and Liana have an unspecified time because they have been treated with cold genes or whatever, but even then they're going to need food, shelter, sustenance like any other normal human being, so I don't know what they're going to be able to do in episode 8 within 10 minutes that's going to save Leighton, which moves us into, are the kids okay? I'm a little bit afraid for Alex because now she's like isolated with Nima, who's clearly very unstable. Not to mention and she's had 9 months of this Gemini chemical exposure and is perhaps already sick and dying. We just don't know it yet. And I feel like now is a good time to mention that it's probably 100% that LJ died at the end of season 3, and we're not going to see her or get any satisfactory wrap up to Oz mentioning her. Like, even Oz finding out that she had died as soon as he left the train and like had died alone without anyone there to help her would have been something. It would have created an emotional release or dispelling of this like tension. But instead, he mentions this, he shows his paranoia in episode 1, and I think a little bit in episode 4, and it looks like we're not going to get anything from it, and that's very frustrating. Like, why include that? The resistance is never a useless element. I thought we were going to re-rally the troops to actually resist and fight against their experimentation and their imprisonment. Now I'm not as confident that we'll get to see that, although I do think if they choose to fight and retake over the base, it will matter at the end of the show. Wilford's train is a fortress to class. We get to see a little bit of that old expectation and stereotype when we find Wiggins in episode 6. As a first-class passenger, Wiggins is complaining that New Eden is mostly Taily, so of course Oz was never going to fit in and they were never going to forgive him, which shows to me minimally the perception of class separation is alive and well. Layton's pitch for a more equal train always included no reprisals, and we have seen evidence that though Oz is fighting and not getting along with Boki, he seems to be getting along just fine with the Tailies, so this was never actually about him not fitting in and not belonging because of what he had done to them in the past. At least not from their side. But Wiggins' fear that the disenfranchised class will reverse the roles if ever given any power is pretty emblematic of one of the many arguments you hear when people talk about creating more equality in the world as a whole. There's a real fear that people in power will be reversed situation instead of just coming out to an even and having more equitable treatment overall, which to me has always been a little bit of a tell in and of itself, because it says that they know the lower class is being treated in a grotesque, inhumane fashion, a way that they themselves would not like to be treated and in fact actively fear. I also think it's possible that Ruth has accidentally set up like a little bit of a class system in her own head, if not actually in the society she's helping to create, as she's so concerned about a lack of engineers. It implies that some jobs are more important, which means that people who hold those jobs are more important and are more likely to get things, we're more likely to make them survive than we are these other people. I get that the engineer is an important person and what they do is unique, and there are less of them than there are like farmers, but the job of the farmer and ag sec to grow food is equally important to life as whatever it is the engineer is doing. And at this point, I'm surprised we haven't been rushing to teach people some basic mechanics of the engine and the cars and all these other elements, because then you as the head engineer could like be giving people directions on what to do from like some kind of central location, instead of like always running off to the far reaches and leaving the main thing unattended. Also, if you're giving like these basic lessons on how a couple of like easy things work, you might be able to see who has like a natural inclination for this kind of role. You could be able to teach more people how to do the full engineering job, which would reduce pressure on the few remaining engineers and also help guarantee a future. And it would also like decommodify the engineers, and it would show that they don't have like this special godly ability that puts them above other people with other skills. And that's more or less where I am with everything Snowpiercer season 4 episode 6 and 7. I am excited for the end of the show. I'm still hoping for some kind of like dramatic and engaging finale, and hopefully we'll see a little bit of a smoother path in execution going forward. But talk to me. Are you still watching Snowpiercer season 4? And do you have any really fun predictions for the finale yet? Let me know in those comments down below. And as always, keep reading.